We did 30K a month in our third month. Since then, we've been at 40, 42, 41 per month, which is, I mean, it's like looking at something that came to life.
So you doubled your income in 90 days?
Exactly. If you asked me where I was just before joining the program, I would have said that, yeah, I was pretty close to rock bottom.
Hey, mate, how are you?
I'm good, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm doing very well. First off, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this with me. I know you're busy, so I very much appreciate it. Why don't you take a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself?
Awesome. My name is Jonathan. I am the owner of a sales agency. We do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. We do a lot of stuff on Instagram. But yeah, I'm somebody that um, is very much in the mold of an entrepreneur. I have been kind of running my own business now for the last coming up on 5 years now.
Hmm.
So it's been 4 years as a company.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I was in the corporate side of things, but since making the jump into entrepreneurship, and sort of building out a team, yeah, that's kind of how I would describe myself right now. I'm 31 years old. I am based out of Toronto, Canada, and a very, very proud member of your mentorship program.
What were you doing in corporate? I actually didn't know that you were in corporate before becoming an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so prior to doing kind of my own thing, I was selling for a Fortune 300 company in the
Okay.
SaaS space.
Yeah,
I'd
nice.
done pretty well there. I was a President's Club winner, but then kind of towards the end of, I was at that company for about 5 years, and then about midway through my fifth year, I'd kind of decided that, it was time to do my own thing and really ramp things up.
Do you know what motivated you to do what you're doing now, like initially, like 4 or 5 years ago?
To be honest with you, it was more out of necessity than anything. It
Hmm.
was basically I because I was working at this corporate company. They had asked me to kind of level up on the education side of things. So I had agreed with them that we were gonna, I was gonna do school while also going to work full time, and they would pay for my education.
Uh-huh.
Halfway through the year, they went through a corporate takeover, and the budget was cut. So I was left with 15 grand of a bill that I needed to sort out in 2 months.
Okay.
And I said, all right, well, I can't extract more out of my 9 to 5, so let me
Yeah.
grind hard on the 5 to 9 and see where we end up. And luckily, I mean, it's an interesting story, but yeah, within that 2 month period, I was able to get what I needed in place, was able to get a couple of consulting clients on, and then I said, oh, well, this is going pretty well. Let's do this full time, and here we are today. We've grown significantly since.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we've been working together, is it 8 months or 9 months?
It has been 8 months, I believe.
8 months. And take me back to 8 or 9 months ago before you joined the coaching. What were some challenges? What were some things that you were going through, pardon me, which did motivate you to invest in yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So, in running this business now for the time that I have, the last 2 years up until this year, right, where I've had the major breakthroughs,
Hmm.
sort of those quantum leaps, we were stuck at about 16K, 16 to 20K per month. And that didn't change for like 2 years. And
Uh-huh.
I was basically ripping my hair out, trying to figure out, what the real bottleneck was. Spoiler, I was the bottleneck. But myself and my paradigms. But yeah, so that was a big component of it. I was really like looking to level up, and I didn't really have an understanding of what the major issues were that were holding me back. I speak to a bunch of friends and colleagues, and everybody has their own opinion, right? But I couldn't really suss out what the thing that was holding me back was.
Hmm.
And then additional to that, um, I guess I was going through what at the time I would have considered difficult. Like, my previous paradigm, I would have said I was going through a difficult time. Now that, I look back on it, I look at that very differently. But right around the time that I joined the program, just before that, my father had passed away. And so I was in a headspace that was not really the most positive, and
Uh-huh.
I was sort of using my memory to look at all of the things that were going wrong.
I remember.
And I was throwing myself basically a pity party, right? And that was not the easiest thing to deal with at the time. But yeah, if you ask me where I was just before joining the program, I would have said that, yeah, I was pretty close to rock bottom. But,
Mhm.
um, you know, I look back on that, and in a way, I'm really, really thankful because going through something like that is what, got me to take the next step, level up, and actually invest in myself. And I'm really, really excited to talk about where I'm at now, which
Awesome.
is filled away.
Well, let's go into that because a lot of people will be listening to this and saying 16,000 a month isn't a bad place to be stuck. What's that quantifies to be about 185,000 a year. But nevertheless, when you're growing a business and you want to grow, whether it's 8,000 a month, 25,000 a month, or even 50,000 a month, it can get very frustrating when you're constantly creating the same results, experiencing the same problems, experiencing the same challenges over and over again.
Yeah.
So, what were your goals that you set 8 months ago?
So 8 months ago, when I sat down and I was crafting out my self-image statement, what I had wrote down at the time was I wanted to base. I'm so happy that I'm bringing in 41K in revenue per month, and
Mhm.
as a business owner, and I'm developing my people. I'm so proud of the work that I'm able to do with them, and how I'm able to show up for them as a leader. That was my self-image statement at the time, and when I was looking back at that, I mean, that was the goal as from a revenue perspective, and
Mhm.
in looking at the bank account, the goal was purely monetary, right?
Uh-huh.
It was just about getting to 40K. And for me, that seemed like almost impossible because it was 2 years of doing the same things over and over again and not seeing any difference.
Okay. So now fast forward 8 months, what tangible results? Because a lot of people take coaching programs and they have very good user experiences, or they love their coach, or they say the program's so great, but it never really quantifies into tangible results. What are some tangible results that you've achieved over the last 8 months?
So I would say that 3 months into the program working with you is where I think things really started to change. I think when you talked about it at the beginning, you said self-development is hard at the start, messy in the middle, and rewarding at the end.
Mhm.
Um, Hard at the start, 1000%, right?
Yeah.
But the messy in the middle, that's where I started to first see some of the indications that, yeah, this is working.
Hmm.
3 months into the program, we smashed every sales record that we had at the company for the last 2 years. I crossed six figures in revenue for one of my clients, which was a big goal for them. And yeah, we did 30K a month in our third month. And over the last, since then, we've been at 40, 42, 41 per month, which is, I mean, it's like looking at something that came to life. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Like you breathe life into it. And yeah, I mean, as tangible goes, smashed it basically.
So you doubled your income in 90 days and have achieved your goal of close to tripling your income in an 8 month period.
Exactly.
I want to speak to something, right? Because this is going to go up on YouTube. But I'd love you to almost speak to like the other clients in the group because I always talk about the gestation period, right? And
Mhm.
you didn't have a great start to the coaching, truth be told. You were very inconsistent, but I always almost think like people need to go through that, like one thing that I always say, and I say to myself, like, when you're trying to create a new habit, the first thing that you should acknowledge is the fact that if I was conditioned to do it, I'd already be doing it.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people quit in that first 8 weeks or 12 weeks when they're going through that messy part, when they're trying to create new habits, when they're failing their way forward, when they've got to be extremely vulnerable. Can you talk about one, I guess, the support that I gave you in that first 3 months, but how important the program was to help you get through that gestation period?
Yeah, for sure. And I have to give credit to you, Justin, because I think like month one into the program, I was kind of, you operate from your old paradigms, right? And a lot of the new behaviors the behaviors that you're cementing for yourself, every time you do the things that you know you should be doing, you have this little voice in the back of your head that says like, oh, this isn't you. Like,
Yeah.
as if like, come on, man, like this is, who are you fooling, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the evidence from prior, that's what that would indicate, right?
Hmm.
So especially in that first month, I remember jumping on board and I called you and I think I said like I want to quit because I don't feel I'm doing, I don't think I'm doing the material right. I'm not
Mhm.
studying consistently. I'm like every day feels a little bit all over the place. And you were the one that kind of said, "Hey, take a step back here. There is a gestation period where you got to take a little bit of time to let this sit and kind of move through it."
Mhm.
And I credit you heavily for like helping me through that process because I am somebody who I want oftentimes I'll dwell on the failures and I'll kind of reinforce or how I used to operate was I'd reinforce this idea that like, oh, this isn't you. Like
Mhm.
there's a reason you're stuck at this number. There's a
Yeah.
reason that, nothing is changing. And like you can get up at whatever time, you can say your affirmations, you can do the revenue generating activities, but this isn't you. Right.
Yeah.
So at the end of that month, I felt very much like an imposter. And I remember calling you from my car and saying like, yeah, like I don't, I'm not doing the work, and I don't feel like this is fair to you either. And
Mhm.
I was very apologetic, I think, and it was very reassuring for us to sit down there and for you to walk me through and talk me through some of the stuff that I wasn't seeing for myself.
Mhm.
Um, just giving me an understanding that like this will take some time. So that was a big breakthrough for me in terms of like allowing the material and allowing the habits to form and allowing myself to sort of move away from my old paradigm and move towards who I actually know I am. Right.
Yeah. And it can be such a mind game too, because it's like hard to put into words, where it's like a sliding scale of relativity. Like when you think about it, right? 3 months feels like a long time when you're going through it, to be failing your way forward, having your intent be perfect, but your results not be perfect. You're going through that messy part. But then, really, if you think about it, to go through that for 3 months, then to double your income at the end of that 3 months, for me, I always say it's a pretty fair deal. So
Yeah,
it's
that's a good
it's
way of putting
relative,
it.
but I like speaking on it, because you didn't get off to the best start, and there was doubt, and there was times where you did have to implement faith. But hats off to you. One, were extremely coachable. One of the biggest things that you were as well is you were vulnerable, and you really let me help you. But had you taken other coaching programs in the past?
Not with self-development. So a funny thing about kind of a lot of the material that we study, it in a way, my dad was huge on personal development, right?
Hmm.
He was very much a student of the game and looked to implement that as much as possible. So I was growing up, these weren't concepts. I mean, it's easy from a conceptual lens to listen to what's being talked about and go like, oh, that totally makes sense. That totally lines up. I can
Uh-huh.
see how this works. It's another thing to actually put it into practice. I
Yes.
hadn't done an actual coaching program, and I kept every time I looked at anything to that effect, I was kind of like, well, I know this material, so like, I know a lot of this stuff already. I know like even like the stick figure person, which
Mhm.
which is very much a mainstay of what we study in the course. Some of that stuff, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, I grew up in a household where that was talked about often,
Uh-huh.
but to actually be in an environment where you're working with somebody who knows this material, who's impacted people and helped them actually level up is very different to just kind of looking at the material from afar.
Yeah.
And until I had done the program with you, I hadn't jumped head first into it. I'd sort of been a casual observer from the side.
So, what would you say then, for example, to someone who's listening to this, who may have been studying personal development for like 4 or 5 years? They may have read Think and Grow Rich, or You Were Born Rich, or things like that, and feel like they kind of know it, but aren't getting the results. What would you say to that person?
In a weird way, I'd want to say to them, stop fooling yourself. I don't know if that's too aggressive or if that comes off a little bit hard. It might be
Uh-huh.
it might be a bit hard to hear for some people, but I feel like you need to work with somebody and work in an environment where you have somebody that you can lean on that can work with you through the problem
Hmm.
because like you said earlier, like if these things were components of who I was already, then I wouldn't be the results wouldn't be where they were,
Yeah.
right? It was jumping into it head first and actually committing to the process and committing to working with somebody that over a period of 6 months I was ready to do the hard yards with. Right, I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of it. Right. And credit to you, Justin. I think like the first time we got on a call and we chatted about sort of my business and what I'm looking to do and kind of the impact that you're looking to have on people, I really resonated with that. And I think that's what kind of made me want to take the jump. But yeah, fundamentally, I think that like you just looking at this material from a conceptual standpoint isn't enough. You
Yes.
need to be in it. You need to be willing to be disciplined, and you don't have to be perfect. Like a big lesson in all of this is you don't have to be perfect, but your intent has to be perfect. And if
Yeah.
you do that, then I think you can take those concepts and make them a part of who you are,
Mm.
and actually implement them as and it not be some sort of like sort of facade, or I don't really know how to communicate
No,
that as effectively as
you're making a
like.
lot of sense. You're articulating it very well. What would you say was the most impactful thing you learned across the 8 months?
So the two big things, one is I think the self-image statement being your biggest accountability partner is a large component of it, right?
Mhm.
And it seems very simple, right? When I was doing the exercise initially, I was like, oh, this makes total sense. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
I don't necessarily, I can see this lecture, I can see how it makes sense here. But a lot of the times when you were on the calls, you were saying like, don't just listen to the material, do the work, right? It's very easy to just listen to the material and think, oh, this makes sense and not actually do anything with it. So I did the actual work. The self-image statement was a big part of that. A big part of what I've garnered through the program is the sort of that earlier statement that I made, which was you don't have to be perfect, but your intent has to be perfect. That's a
Yeah.
very big part of it. And I think the reason that that's so important is because midway through the program, because of some circumstances that were related to some people in my life and kind of what they were going through, and that being very triggering to sort of the passing of my dad a couple of months prior. It was points where I was in bed and I couldn't get up. Like I was in bed and I was just like really thinking about all of the things that I needed to do that day and all the people that were counting on me. And I was just dwelling on this idea that like, how am I going to do any of this? Like I'm so down on my luck. Like, what am I going to do here? Right.
Yeah.
But the big part of that in the middle was making the difference, making an adjustment to what the difference is between my good days and my bad days, right?
Yeah.
Even on the
Yeah.
bad days, showing up is a big part of it, right?
Yes.
Even on those bad days is being able to work through it and sort of reduce the gap between how good you are on your good days and how good you are on your bad days,
I remember
right?
that
That was a
conversation.
big part.
Yeah, I still remember that conversation. I really do. And it was a really big turning point for you. For anyone who's listening, just to give a little bit of context, saying you don't need to be perfect, but your intent needs to be perfect is what a lot of people do is their effort and their output is always depending on outcome, right? So when things are going really well, they're studying, they're doing their auto suggested, and they're showing up at a 10. Uh, but when the outcome is not a desired outcome, the behaviors become very inconsistent, right? And then they start seeing up and down results, like you said, have a really big gap between their best day and their worst day. Um, you, your results don't need to be perfect. Your intent needs to be perfect. Highlights the fact that you need to just form the habit of showing up as your best version of yourself every single day, despite the outside conditions and circumstances. And the truth is that, a lot of people like you are at a really low time in your life when you joined the coaching. And a lot of people are going through things like that where their conditions and circumstances seem so bad that they cannot see a way out, right? They just feel so stuck in what they're doing. But you're just such a great example of if you take control of your mind, like you've heard me say a billion times, discipline your mind and create winning behaviors, i.e., take the self image statement and use that as your greatest accountability partner, you can change things very, very, very quickly. So
100%.
what would you say you're the happiest about, I guess, in this last 8 months? What's been the biggest impact for you?
I mean, the biggest impact is the way that I view problems, is the way that I view kind of how things move because I'm in the sales game. Not every month is going to be your best month, right?
Yes.
And even when you do have those, like, I mean, we did like 42 this last month, right?
Mhm.
42K in the course of a month, and we're looking to trend higher next month. But there is going to be a month where maybe we end up at 37 or 30 or somewhere in between there. So a lot of my job being the CEO of the company, training my sales reps, is being able to not connect what we are doing to the bank account 100%
Mhm.
and not use that as the thermometer, but more so look at, okay, are we on the day doing the things that we need to do to move the needle? Are we creating those winning behaviors? And that's been a big part of me working with my team, right?
Yeah.
Is being able to instill that ideology as well. I think when you're a leader in a company role, you if even if the entire thing is crashing underneath you, if you can show up and be firm and reassured in yourself that this is an opportunity, you're going to be able to see the opportunity in this, and you're going to come out stronger, and
Uh-huh.
you're not this and dwelling on the loss component or where the difficulties are. I think that goes a long way in terms of instilling confidence in the people that are working for you,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
that has had a huge impact on my organization and kind of how we're trending.
Yeah, awesome. I love to hear that. Did you have any final comments? Did you have anything that I didn't cover that you'd like to add or that you had planned to say or
Um, a couple of things that I would touch on. I think that anybody that's considering doing this program, there's a large component of to the large thing that I would say to them is
Mhm.
see it through, commit to it, and do the work,
Yeah.
right? It's very easy for somebody to look at this material because it's not like this material is rocket science by any means, right? It's very simple. It's about the
Yeah.
execution of it and
Mhm.
actually being consistent and disciplined with it,
Yeah, that's
right?
great.
So that's the biggest thing that I would say to anybody that's considering doing this program. You can change your life in 6 months. You can I changed the revenue of our business in 4 months, technically,
Mhm.
right? But if you asked me on month two, I would have, operating from the paradigm that I was in at the time, I would have said, oh man, fat chance. Like I'm
Yeah.
doing the work, but that the actual evidence to show myself, no, like, you're doing the right things. I had to separate the I had to create a new thermometer what is around what success looks like, or what am I doing the work is the key component,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing that I would say is you need to give yourself time. You need to be in it for the long haul and commit to doing this work. And if you show up every day, and your intent is perfect, you will get the results that you're looking
Yeah. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's such an underspoken about and underrated piece to success, that gestation period, and we see online on Instagram, people talk about like doubling or tripling their income in a very, very short period of time. And you see that it's possible, but they didn't do it in 1 day or 2 days, and it's everyone that I know that I've coached that has created results went through that gestation period, and I don't know, I don't only want to thank you for your time today. I want to congratulate you for what you've created.
at. Thank you.
I know where you were. We've obviously had a couple of private conversations in the beginning part of the coaching, and it took a lot of fucking guts and a lot of courage to show up and to be vulnerable. So yeah, you should be really proud of yourself. And that 41,000 a month is, I think, everyone wants to increase their income, but I always say the person you become, like, for example, you saying the way you look at problems is totally different, you know, no one can ever fucking take that away from you, and a lot of people out there running businesses and they're riding the highs of the highs and the lows of the losses. And when you can be even keeled and even smile in the face of adversity, entrepreneurship, business ownership, life becomes a lot of fun. So I want to congratulate you for the work that you did. Took a lot of courage and a lot of guts. So that's awesome.
Thank you, Justin. And to be frank, I could not have done this without you. I really, really appreciate all of the support, the guidance, and thank you for not giving up on me as well. If in month one, you'd not held me accountable to actually doing the work, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. I don't think my business would be where it's at today.
It's my absolute pleasure, my friend. It's been a pleasure working with you.
You as well, Justin.
Thank you for your
Thank you
time.
so much.
Hey, you made it through to the end. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like, comment, or share. Or if you'd like an in-depth breakdown of exactly how I've helped over 2,000 students globally achieve both their personal and professional goals, click the case study beside me and enjoy.